Welcome to our series Researchers with a Passion. My name is Nerina Finetto and my guest today is...
I'm Ching Goh. I'm from Malaysia. At the moment, I'm working as a senior lecturer in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning, Faculty of Field Environment in University of Malaya based in Kuala Lumpur.
Thank you so much for joining me. What are your main research interests?
The research topics itself, the theme itself is very much related to how my thoughts has evolved, I would say, these years. In the beginning, when I started with urban planning, so we planned for the urban area. Then my second degree, that means master degree, I work on tourism planning. Then that time, I do realize that when we talk about tourism, when we talk about urban area, what have been missing is always about the foundation or the fundamental of the resource, because this is where we see the resource, and the resource form the foundation for urban area to operate. It becomes the foundation for tourism to operate, and that's how I shift into this natural resource governance. Natural resource here means it involves like forest, it involves like water, like river, and that is what I mean by natural resource. Then, of course, I also focus on governance because I believe that is the major drivers, I would say, that actually have an impact on how natural resource is being used, being utilized, and actually being exploited.
Urban planning and natural resources are related topics, right?
How I see urban planning is that it is not to be exploited at the expense of natural resource, but these two should come together and build what we call sustainable developments of urban area or sustainable of cities. Why we have sustainable cities, for instance, to be in the list of the Sustainable Development Goals for the first time, because these didn't appear, for instance, in the Millennium Development Goals. One of the reasons is that our cities, we plan without considering the natural resource, and that is where that disasters start coming in. We only see urban area as a built environment, a concreted environment without the natural environment, without really seeing that urban area and urban development as actually a ecosystem that combining the built environment and also the natural environment.
What are you working on right now?
At the moment, I moved a little bit, I would say, from urban planning to what we call the regional planning. So at the moment, I'm working on national parks and also marine parks in Sabah, which is located on Malaysia, Borneo.
The Borneo rainforest is the oldest in the world, 130 million years old. That's 70 million years older than the Amazon. Out of the 12 regions of mega biodiversity in the world, Borneo ranks with Amazonia and Equatorial Africa. Borneo lies in the heart of the mega biodiversity ecoregion of the Indo-Pacific Basin and Malaysia. Sabah is special because in terms of biodiversity per unit area, Sabah is the best in Borneo. According to the National Geographic, 10 square kilometers of Malaysian rainforest has more flora and fauna than that of North America and Europe combined. Here, in the Indo-Pacific Global Center of Coral Biodiversity, is the cradle of coral evolution. Beginning with 70 genera in the areas around Borneo, it reduces gradually as one moves outwards. The Coral Triangle, the Amazon of the seas, is the center of marine biodiversity for the world. It is home to one of the most diverse collections of marine life in the world, with over 75% of coral species known to science, over 3,000 species of reef fish, over 500 species of coral. This is unmatched in the world in terms of marine biodiversity per unit area.
Sabah is the poorest state in Malaysia, but at the same time is that they have the most beautiful natural resource, and there's always a promotion about Sabah You can climb up to the mountain because that's where the highest mountain of Malaysia is located. And at the same time, we have a fabulous, marvelous marine ecosystems down to the sea. So it's from the mountaintop until right underground, under sea. That's why you really see right the beauty of Sabah.
What is the most relevant topic you are investigating?
It's actually about the interactions between human and also with nature. So that is the main research questions that we are looking at. But then when we go into the details, we are looking at how human utilize resources. What is the state of the natural resource that we are talking about? And how can we actually make a general relationship between these two for the well-being of the people and at the same time for the health ecosystem of the marine biodiversity.
What results have you gotten so far? Do you have any concrete suggestions?
Good question. Actually, when I started with the national parks, for instance, the main thing is that we really have to consider the local people's livelihood before we can actually address nature conservation. I think the natural resource is not that we appreciate it in terms of the intrinsic value, but the first thing is that we need to understand why people are utilizing it and why people are exploiting it. Yeah, and from there, that is where that we can find options that to address the issues, how the human and nature interact. Then, what are the challenges behind that before we can actually provide a solution to it. And this actually needs time. I'm from Peninsula Malaysia, and that's going to Malaysia, Borneo, for instance. Even though I'm a Malaysian, but I'm considered as a outsiders. Yeah. So main things is to gain the trust. And that trust will help actually to facilitate already to understand the real situation, the real issues that actually exist in that particular study case.
What kind of methods do you use? Do you have a quantitative or qualitative approach?
We started with quantitative, but to understand the dynamics, it's not easy at all, if you want to use questionnaire survey. And then now, for instance, when I extended my research from national parks, the terrestrial parks, to the marine parks, for instance, we start combining with interviews, focus group discussion, and also stakeholders meeting, because stakeholders meeting will address one of the central questions is about the governance. We see how people interact and how they provide their opinions, how they address the issues before we go to the smaller group where we have this stakeholders meeting. We get all the stakeholders that we could identify to come, and then they will discuss about issues. But from there, that is where that we go to the second layers of stakeholders meeting again. Because it's from there that we realize that what would be the dynamics, who that you can talk to, who you cannot talk to, how to address the issues with someone that you cannot talk to, for instance, because of some sensitivity. And at the same time, for those that we can talk to, but at the same time, they were reluctant to talk to during the stakeholders, the first layers of stakeholders meeting because of the power struggle. So that is where I do realize that stakeholders meetings provides a very good platform for us to collect the data when we talk about governance, and at a more formal, but you can say it's actually leading to the informal level.
Who are the stakeholders?
In national parks, we have Sabah Park Boards of Trustees, we have the forestry department, and in marine parks we have fishery, we have agriculture department, we have the NGOs, and NGOs is not only limited to the nature conservation NGO, the community NGO, they are also can be divided again. For instance, those that is a local initiative, those at the state level, national level, and of course we have the international NGO. For instance, what we are dealing with now is WWF and Reef Check. So those are the international level, but of course they have the office in Malaysia. Then the local initiators, NGOs, again, that is where the power struggles start coming in, because they always feel so capable. So we always need to consider the weaker one And those that they are very vocal, because the vocal ones normally will have the impacts or implications when it comes to a group discussion. It will make the weakest one to keep silence, for instance. So that is where we really have to identify. Then apart from that, of course, we involve the universities. And that's why researchers also have their passions and of course the interests. And it's always not so easy to work together from the very beginning. It needs some understanding, needs some trust as well. And that actually would help when we talk about how to exchange data and exchange the opinions. Because when we talk about ethics, research ethics, this is something that we really have to be careful about as well and concerned. Then back to just now when I mentioned about some the stakeholders, the government agencies, for instance, in Malaysia, because we are a federal country, federal monarchy actually, country. So we have the government agencies at the federal level, the state level as well, and they have their dynamics when they talk about the interaction too. So those are the dynamics that we really have to consider when we do the stakeholders analysis. That's as an outcome from the stakeholders meeting.
What is the biggest challenge at the moment?
It's a territorial. I think all the stakeholders have their different interests, and so far there's not much of consensus buildings. And the consensus buildings actually need to bring everyone together. For instance, if I give you examples, is that when we talk about fishery, we talk about conservation-based NGOs even. It's two conflicting agencies in terms of the interests. We want more fish, but you are talking about conservation. Yeah, so this is conflicting. And how to come to the consensus. And that is something that most of the agencies they avoid to actually discuss about. Because when you talk about to build consensus, it actually means also that we have to compromise to an extent, and no one wants to compromise. Yeah, so that is something is very tricky, and at the same time, we do realize, for instance, in the case of the national park, at the Terrestrial Park, compared to the marine parks that I'm working on, they have a different dynamics, I would say, when they talk about different challenges, and the degree of the challenges is different again.
What kind of outcome would you like to see from this project?
That will be the ideal situation, but I'm sure that is always a guiding principle. The closer we get to, I think that would be the best then, is to make every stakeholders understands not only about their own interests, but also other stakeholders' interests. Because when only everyone at least make known about the interests of everyone, then they make a decision about what they think is right, and you understand about other people's interests. I think that is the most important thing. In developing countries, in the past, for instance, in Malaysia, traditionally, when we talk about development, when we talk about planning, it's always top-down. When top-down, it's always when we talk about the local peoples, they are not actually well understood about their needs. It's always the government thinks that we are doing the best for you. But now, when we have these stakeholders, we are talking about, it's not only about the government interests at the federal level, the state level, but also we are talking about the local communities even that actually are involved as a stakeholder. And actually, I forgot just now, when we talk about the stakeholders, the largest one is actually the local communities. If I give an example, I'm sure every parent would like the best for their children. And sometimes they actually forgot about the needs, what actually the children want. What they want. So this is examples that I would say for our government. They are trying their best to do the best for the local people, but sometimes they may not fully understand their needs. And so when we have this stakeholders meeting and analysis, we go to the ground, do the job, get their opinion, and this is best to start the communication.
This means that you would like to have an influence on future policies, right?
It will be policy relevance in a way, I would say, but we do not want to approach, for instance, the policymakers directly. Of course, we see that how SDGs is addressed now, why it is become so important. The main reason is that it is no longer focusing on the science-based research. What is more important is about the society and how to link science right to the society. And this society includes the policy makers, it includes the local communities at the grassroots level, and the society as a whole when we talk about we becoming, for instance, a more developed or more progressive society. So this is where that I see then we try to combine the scientific research, but at the same time try to actually learn from the local communities, learn from them, try to combine this, and then try to use I would say a very diplomatic way to talk to the policy makers.
How difficult is it to initiate change?
We need to change even in the system itself, but to change it, to tell the government to change it, for instance, right, is not possible. What we learned from the case of mangrove, for instance, mangrove conservation in Malaysia is that I think the scientists have done a whole lot of research telling or mentioning about the importance of mangrove. It didn't work to the policies maker. So we are using another way, and also being in the university as an academic, what would be really, I see our roles is that I'm not going to be an NGO. I'm not going to be the policy makers as well, but we would like to link, to become the mediator, linking what actually being addressed by the NGO, what is actually being addressed by the local communities, and link with the bureaucrats, so that's a channel to actually facilitate the dialogues again. Because this is what we see in Malaysia, government refuse to listen, and then the scientists will be publishing, but then we don't see there's a bridge between, to make it more fruitful.
Why are you so passionate about these topics?
I didn't like it from the beginning, I have to say that. I was born and also brought up in rural area, in a small village. I remember that village is only there's 2 Chinese families out of the 72 households. Being a rural girl, I would say that I would appreciate to go to the urban area. I mean, I went to the university. That is when I was a science student until the secondary school. Then after that, I decided to choose urban and regional planning, because during that time, for a secondary student to choose a university in Malaysia, it's only we only have a very limited choices. It's 2 universities that offer the courses. Otherwise, you have to go to 2 years of higher, we call it a higher secondary school. Then you can have the full choice of the university that you can enter. So that time was University Technology Malaysia and University of Putra Malaysia. And University Technology Malaysia, apart from urban planning and architecture and also quantity surveyor, the rest may deal with engineering courses. And I thought that time it was really boring to go into engineering course, because I think they are very fascinated with engineering. And that's how I got into urban and regional planning. Right after my first degree, after 5 years, I took a tourism planning course. I actually liked the natural area, and that's where I actually conducted my case study for my mini thesis, a master studies, actually in national park already. Then after that, I worked in the corporate sector for 4 years with a developer. So basically, I was cutting down the trees for 4 years for real estate development. So the companies that I was working with is one of the top 5 companies in Malaysia in terms of real estate development. After 4 years, I start to think about what I really want in my life. And I was lucky enough that I got a scholarship, and that's why I fired, of course, my employer, and then I furthered my study. And that time, the topic that I chose actually is on ecotourism. Yeah. Back to the question that you asked, why I chose that. I think that was already in me, but I didn't realize that. But when I chose my case study, that is in Kinabalu Park, which is also the first World Heritage Site of Malaysia, and that's in Sabah. That's the terrestrial park that I am working on it. Still, I'm working on it. Actually, I started in 2005. Is where, when I went to the site and stayed in the forest for 1 year, I do realize that how nature shapes human. People are very friendly, people are very innocent, and people are very kind. And then coming from, because of the corporate background, for 4 years, I would say that I was toxified to an extent. And then it's also the society when they talk about Malaysia. And also I was brought up in a Chinese family. And in Oriental or Asian society, it always have this unconscious or maybe conscious competition. It's like, oh, people will ask, how's your daughter doing in exam? And that sort of competitions that I do realize, to an extent, it helps me, it equips me to survive in the corporate world. But at the same time, I was losing myself. Back to the nature, and I learned about this. I learned how to be myself and express myself much better. And in Germany, for instance, when I was attached to this Center for Development Research, we mix around, right? My colleagues and friends, they're from all over the world. And that's how I learned to listen, rather than it's like you always have to guard and then protect or defend what you're saying, but learn how to listen, not only to talk. And that listening is actually the best language, I would say. And that's how I link back to nature, because in nature, you do not need to speak. For instance, now when I'm doing my research, for instance, stakeholders meeting or focus group discussion, and to listen to people carefully what they are talking about, and be patient as well. And I really appreciate how it actually evolved.
Are there any moments from your childhood or your past that you think may have played an important role in becoming who you are today?
Childhood, I used to have a tiger mom. I'm the youngest in the family. My mom passed away when I was 14, so that was difficult. And because of that, I became much more independent. I'm very happy to be a Chinese. I received my primary school education in a Chinese school. But when I entered the University Technology Malaysia for my bachelor degree, I need to share rooms with 2 Malay roommates. That was a university policy. The first year you have to mix, right, the roommates. It shouldn't be from the same race. So that's to create some race integration. That's what happened. And that's helped me a lot, because I do realize when I do research in Sabah, many of them they are from different ethnic groups, but Malay language, for instance, I'm always perceived as a Chinese that can speak good Malay. And I do understand about the culture because of I think it's because I live with different roommates from different ethnic groups. It helps you to become more sensitive and try to understand as well about other people's cultural practice. And that actually helped me a lot, right, when I do my research, I would say.
You mentioned that you are happy to be Chinese. In your opinion, what makes Chinese culture so special?
That is something that, right, it's funny because when you just now you asked that, I was thinking, yes, it's like no doubt, but now try to point it out, it's like, what I really I've been like so much or love so much, I mean, by being raised in a Chinese family, I like the perseverance. My father is he was a farmer, a paddy farmer, and I see that how perseverance, for instance, in him and hardworking. And these two, I would say, it's really something that I really appreciate and learn from him. Yeah, because I think being raised in a Chinese family within Malay village, and it was not easy for me, because it's like I think since I was young, I feel that as distinctive, but at the same time it's that it's like okay, actually you have other friends from other ethnic groups that come together and speaking. And also I like how the Chinese appreciate the relationship, it's not in a very vocal, expressive manner, but at the same time it's that we are perseverance. I think it's back to the perseverance then. We are not very vocal in general, especially I think being a farmer. My father, for instance, he normally lets the actions talk rather than he himself talk. And that is something that I learned from him then, and be perseverance. Yeah, because we came from a very poor family, I come from a very poor family, even my father, for instance, right? And we do realize that that should not be something that going to beat us down. Yeah, and that's something that I do really appreciate.
What is life about?
Life is a journey. That's what I always believe. It is just like a process. I used to be trained in Malaysia, trained as an urban planner. I plan everything. But I do realize that I have to be very patient to get to the outcome, but actually to enjoy the process itself. And one of the quotes that I always remember is that life is actually a learning process, and learning process actually continues and gets harder until we learn. And that is something that I do realize that when there's a challenge, I always see it positively, and there must be something that I could learn and try to move on. And that once I have this it's kind of breakthrough. It actually enrich my life towards betterment.
Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you. Welcome.
And thank you all for watching, listening and sharing. Keep wondering and see you soon again. Bye and ciao.